Alright everyone, good evening. This is Rillian streaming from the Amara2_MK channel. This content will be rebroadcast to our main 2_MK channel, as always with full permission. Today the crew is doing basic battleground training. We couldn't decide whether or not to do Mish Mashing or Sandbag casuals, but since everyone wanted to get some practice in, we figured we'd Sandbag in a different way today. And in the meantime, since that means that we won't have a very specific person's perspective on what's going on at any given time, I'll throw in my contribution as well, and quote-unquote kill some time looking through Zeku's move list and give me some basic idea of what the bot will be like beforehand. Minot was easier to deal with in terms of starting off like that, but we'll see what happens in the sense of making sure that everything is possible. And furthermore, figuring out what exactly is supposed to be possible. That being one of our biggest issues for any given bot. What is the purpose and the goal of the bot for everyone when they try to use it? So for those of you who weren't aware, the Zeku information is actually up on Capcom's site. There are other places you can find it, but probably the best way to use it is game.capcom.com, and he is fairly easy to find it there if you're familiar or not familiar. The site is set up well enough that you just go to character data, find the character you're looking for, and you've got everything. So having watched the showcase now, at least the WSO one, I didn't finish watching the other one yet, I have a fairly good idea so far of what we want to do with this bot. As usual, the aim is to make sure that the bot is not necessarily how the standard player will play him, because that could vary quite a lot. For example, Galbot 1.0 and 2.0. It's also possible that we'll make a ZekuBot. But until we are clearer on the matchup, there is another thing that Zeku can be used for, which might in fact turn out to be what his matchup training is about, because basically any new character has a specific set of first strategies that most people will be able to grasp and deal with and quote-unquote come up with on their own, even if they're not particularly fans of the game to the point where they watch a lot of tutorials or any of those things. There's also the obvious fact that once the game is out, you'll see a lot of his trials and other ideas from the game itself, like they'll tell you in the demonstrations, play this character this way, do this thing. Those aren't necessarily altogether useful for something like bot making in full, but it is likely to teach you how other people have been taught to play the character. So, what do we know about how people tend to play new characters? Well, the simplest fact is that they go for whatever seems to work best and whatever is most confusing for the opponent. Yes, lots of us like to put a lot of effort into making sure we're very good at new characters, but again, since our bots are mostly for people who are in bronze and silver and working out how to get out of those ranks, or at least to get much better within those ranks, there's not a lot that you expect. When you're going into rank against someone who is quote-unquote just bronze or silver with Zeku, you shouldn't be expecting extremely high level tactics because you presume that such people are most likely in gold or just messing around winning casuals and not necessarily taking it very seriously. So what we're talking about now is, you know, helping you get ready for when you are moving up and you are expecting to be pummeled by someone who is taking it super seriously, but are not necessarily high level themselves yet to the point where it overwhelms you in itself. So looking at Zeku's moveset and going through from there, we have a bunch of stuff about zoning in his old form, and rushdown or something close to rushdown in his other form. We know that he has moves in his old form that let him do a sort of mix-up, and he also has some moves in the younger form that let him do a sort of mix-up. But when I'm designing bots, I don't generally look at those things first, because you have to understand more than anything else how inputs are able to interact with each other and which pieces you're going to have to try to make space for. So the first thing that stood out from watching the showcase, and will probably stand out to anyone who intends to play Zeku, is that his old form can use his ram kicks to zone very heavily. They have extremely long range, very high priority, lots of active frames. So you're going to have to put up with them and figure out how you want to deal with them. So rather than putting you up against someone who has had time to play Zeku a lot and focus on when they want to do it relatively independent of your character, you need, even if you've only just bought Zeku yourself, just to try him out or to practice against him in future, or if you just have the season pass and happen to have him available already. You're going to need a way to make sure that you understand Ram enough to counter it in whatever way your own character is able to. Now, the three forms of Ram I was somewhat hoping didn't all turn out to be as useful as each other. This is because if you're familiar with our bots, there's the edge shift, which requires you to input a motion, be it a charge motion or a quarter circle forward or a quarter circle back. Once you've input that, then you put an attack button on the beginning of a different input, and you use that to create mix-ups, unexpected moves, different moves at different times, etc. However, the more of these a character has, especially if they have moves that go in two different directions, the more difficult it is to fit them all in. You can at most, with 5 recordings, manage to get 5 buttons. You can mess around with it in some ways to get the EX as well, but then you have to be even more careful. So I was hoping from the very beginning that the ram kicks were either going to be the main thing he used or conditional things he used. And based on the showcase, it looks like kicks are mostly going to be focused around the heavy kick one to anti-air zone, and maybe the medium kick to juggle and keep you out after that. So I only really need to figure out how to deal with those two. And while the EX one is stronger, better, has good juggles and all of those things, it doesn't seem necessary to make sure that he can do the EX one as much, which is probably a good sign. Especially if I can use the EX input for just his up kicks, as we're now calling them. Basically, it's invincible reversal. This is technically called Ban, but at least I hope it's called. Yeah, that one must be Ban. So you're going to get that form, which is a Shoryuken motion with kick, and Teki, which is the back motion. So at the minimum, I need him to have some kick options at the beginning of stuff, and 3 edge shifts to occasionally link into these things. That's not too hard, so I've got some space to work with from here. Especially since he has another quarter circle forward motion, there are no charges, there are no special inputs, there are no half circles, and very few things involving specific shifts. He has some cool V skill with direction stuff though, which seems to be combo related and might be a little bit difficult to fit in. There are other ways around this, of course, because you can do some tricks with links, but he doesn't seem to link into Graham very much, which is another good thing for having enough space in the bot to do stuff. So it's very likely that we're going to be going with some form of heavy or medium Graham as the main edge shift that we're aiming for, also allowing us to give him heavy kick and medium kick in neutral, or some form of sweep, something like that where he doesn't really have to spend a lot of time near you. And his back dash, while good, is not awesome, so I probably don't need to put it in too many places. I can hide most of them so that you don't have to worry about that constantly. From there, it's a question of how many quote-unquote sick combos we want him to be able to do, and how often we want him to change form. Form changes for this character are apparently fairly linear. Unlike Gen, who specifically would easily change form in the middle of a combo, let's say, and finish the combo as another form, or finish the mix-up and setup as another form, Zeku has more so the latter ability, and not even as much of it as Gen does. He also has moves that specifically let you use the V skill as a hit, and then once you've done that, it will change his form for you. So we can definitely set up situations in which he gets close to you, or you get close to him and he uses it for defense, and then he moves back into position after having changed form, hopefully by knocking you down. So I'm planning to hide a lot of stuff in his Graham kick, and that might make him a little hard to input, but I'll see if I can figure out some way to get the input time such that most people in their normal rhythm will get it done without a problem. The main aim will definitely be making sure that after Graham he can change, but he will only change if a certain thing happened. If the Graham either went too far, went too high, something had to go wrong for the Graham to make him change form. Probably you managing to somehow completely evade it. If you were all the way on the other side of the screen, maybe I want him to keep doing it, maybe I don't. But becoming predictable as a character is probably the worst thing that one can do with Zeku, and therefore we should make sure that the bot does not do predictable things just so that we can learn to deal with the predictable things. It's probably going to go away very fast.
Round one.
So, the next obvious problem of a two-stance character is that either I need to make the bot change form and then stay in one form, which is unlikely to be how most people play him. Even though he does have two very different fighting styles, most people who would pick up a character like Zeku seriously have a full intention of using him both. So I have to find a way to make sure that he changes style not too often, but also that every input has a meaning and use in both forms. Fortunately, he doesn't actually have that many moves per se in his young form. He has a relatively large number of target combos. His moves themselves aren't different in terms of their inputs, presumably because he's already used up so many. But you're still going to get the same quarter circle forward and punch, quarter circle forward and kick. But the difficulty part is that his run, Hayagake, leads into more kicks, and it leads into 3 different kicks. And that's where the main stressor of building ZekuBot is probably going to come from. Figuring out how to make him able to do these, and whether or not it's even worth it. Usually, the answer is yes. He does have a good reason to use all of his options out of run, same way Guy did, and we're going to have to find a way to add each of these to him separately and individually. However, I don't think it's going to be too hard to do. This is primarily because, fortunately for us, he also has the down forward kick in old mode, and presumably once that move starts, it doesn't actually care what button you hit after it. I can just hide things in Koku version of Graham and hit other kicks at different typings, and he will then proceed on from there to do Hayagake mix-ups in the other mode. The problem with that is that it now has expanded us back again. Now I have different versions of Graham in old mode just for the sake of having all of the mix-ups in the young mode, which is actually what I was trying to avoid. I was happy to not have to use multiple forms of Graham before. Either way, it does mean that our primary option here is the down to forward motion, and hopefully some kick stuff in neutral, or entirely different setups that come from doing the entire motion with the kick and finding something else to fill in the rest of the space. Now with a character that has this many target combos, one of our bigger problems is always the fact that target combos tend to have relatively variable lock stun relative to what the player is expecting, and therefore obviously it has different frame data. Sometimes if you stop at this point of it, it's very negative. Sometimes if you stop at this point of it, it's very plus. Well, not very plus, but usually at least a little bit plus. Where in the target combo stops, especially longer ones, has a fairly large effect on whether or not it's punishable. And if you're familiar with Guy, that's the same thing you're facing. Here you have a character who will do a target combo, and you have to figure out, similar to Ibuki, whether or not that target combo is now something you should try to punish. You can't do it based on seeing the start of that combo. You have to decide, okay, now which did he end with? Fortunately, he doesn't seem to have different paths, but if it turns out that his light medium is in some way fairly safe, or plus, he might be inclined to go for another button.
Final round.
In which case you'd have to invincible uppercut your way out, but assuming that he is completely plus enough to hit another light button, because that does sometimes happen, you don't really have an option here, and the bot is just going to need what Ibuki has, the ability to change whether or not he finishes the target combo with one thing or another. Since some of these things are also weirdly cancelable, there's another problem, and his V skill and V trigger are probably beyond that. Although, fortunately, it appears as if his V skill and V trigger are straightforward enough that the player won't need to know how to deal with them in strict sense. They just do what they do, and if you don't dodge them, then there's nothing to worry about. There's no mix-up that I can see where you have to deal with this. You do have to worry about whether or not the player has decided to do anything at all, because he can just activate it as a cancel and then do nothing, which can make people pretty antsy, I think. But that means that I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to get the right amount of these things into the bot. Beyond that, we have the good fortune of the fact that his down heavy punch is in itself a command normal, or at least a command normal that leads into other things in such a way that it causes a target combo. This is useful because he has down and 2 punches as the second half of his transformation. So tap down once, tap down and 2 punches again, and he'll transform. This means that we'll be able to usefully edge shift the transformation itself without actually having to put him to either hide the transformation fully, so I can give him at least 2 transformation timings, but he won't always transform after the same things. After we've poked around with the character a bit and decided whether or not it's actually a good idea for him to transform after the same things all the time, then sure, we can work from there. But as it is now, we at least have the option of making him able to do it the other way. To just have the situation set up in his favor where he doesn't do this. Furthermore, most target combos are not affected at all by the direction you're holding at the time. So, I can end something with his light medium, and then hit something like crouch heavy. So I have one input that has light medium at the end, one input that has down heavy at the end, and I'm presuming, given how most characters work unless their target combo itself is variable, that he will just do the target combo as normal and not cause any stress or fuss there. Which means that I can use that key, the ending of his target combo will also act as a transformation trigger. I figured that sequence needed some silence with it. Now we have the last difficulty of the character, and probably the thing that will be most hardest to fit into the bot, and the hardest to turn into a good point system. He has his wall jump in his younger form. And if I'm remembering correctly, he also, let's see, he does not have his wall jump in his older form, which is even more complicated now. The specifics of wall jump have to do with the timing of recording. It's probably going to be the hardest thing to fit into. Because we need to first create a situation where it's advantageous to the character to get himself into the corner. And then from there, find at least some random-ish time to try to get out of the corner by wall jumping. Furthermore, misleading and not actually doing the wall jump. So what do we know about that, which is fairly easy to tell? We know that when he is doing the wall jump, which is forward after getting near to the wall, he can press another button very quickly to cause something else to happen. So that means that we must have somewhere a single forward and then kick or punch input. This is not necessarily all that hard, honestly though, because if we are doing a down to forward motion, it will usually manage to create that same input on its own without you doing anything in particular. Therefore, we're probably going to be able to have wall jump stuff that actually has the edge shift in it, and if you happen to be on the ground for whatever reason, it will cause the versions of the bottom, the grounded buttons that we care about more to come up. So the forward version will be fine. Hopefully we will get the spacing right so you don't have to worry about it. Especially since it doesn't seem as if we're going to be comboing a lot of his moves.
So, are you basically saying that we can use the wall jump to sort of distinguish the bot's own old form and young form moves, more or less?
It's in terms of creating the bot's ability to move back and forth. It's more so about whether or not he has enough inputs to force the behaviors to not change too much between the two forms. And in order to do that, I have to change the rhythm of the bot entirely so that in the young form, he will tend to jump back onto the wall. And in the old form, he will not do that in the same situations, but from the same input. This will probably be easy based on the fact that the two have different normals. It will be harder if the old form's normals are actually slower. No, actually it's the other way around. If the old form's normals are faster than the younger form's normals, somehow, it's going to become a problem in terms of bot creation.
Because he starts out as old form, and so the faster ones are harder to hide things in and such?
Sort of. It is rather that I need him to be able to do a move in old form, hide a back jump in it, and then continue with the down to forward motion. And I need him to do the down to forward motion fairly late after the back jump too. Whereas I need him to hit the same button in the young form. And if that button whiffs, then he should jump back and then do a down to forward motion and jump off the wall and do something else. So I'm going to have to hope that he has a certain set of normals in different forms that give him about a 10 frame gap between the two, between the old form hitting with one and the young form whiffing one and then jumping backward. Because above all else, it is true to say that his forward jump near the wall needs to have at least enough delay or difference in the height he manages to go to give you the same stressors that Vega causes. Otherwise, it's not really going to be effective. Just the punch versus kick, I'm pretty sure from the showcase that they demonstrated that the punches and kicks themselves don't make a difference. He goes the same distance in all the cases. The issue is how far he was from the wall when he did it.
I see.
And he doesn't seem to be able to jump off the wall and specifically wait longer before doing the thing in question. This is fine though because he has air throw. Although it's not directly indicated that he has air throw, he does have some form of air throw and some form of Tiger Knee style cancelled version of the Tozetsu.
The what?
No, it's probably not Tozetsu actually. I'm not actually sure because now that I look at it... Oh, no, it's Bushinsho. Bushinsho is the one that will knock you, that will let him dash forward, and then he can knock you up into the air, presumably with Tozanto. Which is actually fine because I'm pretty sure that the way this looks and the way the combos work, those go together fine. I'm not going to have a problem finding space for those. The heavy part of this is definitely going to be managing to get him to backdash to give himself space, do moves out of the backdash, make sure that he jumps off the wall properly, and once he's jumped off the wall properly, still have enough time to do mix-ups and change forms at will. I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of backdash into down, which is part of my problem in terms of space. If I'm doing backdashes into down and not hiding backdashes in other moves, we're going to see a little bit of tight spacing in the number of things I can use at the end, because I will be running out of space to put edge shift options at the end of the edge shift, and I think I need at least, it will reach the point where I'll find myself struggling and saying I need 6 of these but I don't have 6, and then I'll have to come up with something ridiculous and probably make people stressed or make a variant. It's really hard to tell what exactly will happen when you have 2 characters, and of course, once we do see how other people play him, I'll be watching a lot of stream video and concepts and seeing what other people think is how Zeku should fight, but most likely, the main thing I'm going to be asking everyone to do is either play me when I'm playing him or go online and see what the standard bronze to high silver Zeku is actually trying to do. And if we can find some consensus in that, then I'll start to tailor the bot toward whatever is happening, because at the end of the day, the key is this is not an academic pursuit at the moment. Maybe 2.0 bots, maybe just me messing around to see how cool a bot I can make would be good, but this is not an academic pursuit of is this bot supposed to be able to do really bombastic, incredible, expressive things. It's always good when I can manage to clip some really cool combos into the bot. Like Ed, I spent a decent amount of time trying to figure out whether or not I could usefully do his whole combo in different pieces. But with Clawbot, for example, there are like 6 Clawbot combos that I thought to myself, I have all the pieces, but there's no way to put this together in a way that would lead to him actually doing this combo in any normal situation, without destroying the purpose of the bot itself.
Final round. Fight.
So of course, we're going to be looking at the frame data changes that he will get, whether or not Idaten has enough plus or minus properties to cause someone stress, and how long an Idaten combo should be. But don't expect to see any Idaten combos, because the optimal ones are basically hit all 6 buttons in some sequence, Gatling combo, Derby Gear stuff. And there's no good reason to do this in most inputs. Managing to do that with Minat was next to impossible, and I didn't really bother that much, to be honest. Minatbot has like 2 sequences in which she can hit you with all of the orbs, but I think the chances of her doing it are astronomically small. It's like it's at least 1 in 125, because she has to do a certain thing from close, and then she has to go through a sequence of 3 specific actions when you didn't block. It's not likely that it's going to come out. Zeku, on the other hand,
Fight.
let's put it another way. If I had to make a Gen bot, I'm almost hoping Gen is not added to this game with his normal command list, because making Gen bot would be nearly impossible. Fortunately, that character relies heavily on normals and not on a lot of specific setups, because, well, in Crane style anyway. Because for a character to go entirely from having charge moves to having motion moves requires more complexity than Chun-Li, because if you do them in a mode where it doesn't make any sense to do this but do this here because it doesn't combo or something, then you just end up lost. So for the moment, that's our main push here. And our other problem, as noted, is that we are definitely going to have to hit kick into kick at some point. This shouldn't affect the wall dive version. In fact, that makes it technically easier. Let's hope. But we also don't know what will happen if you hit, for example, you start to do the kick and then you hit the V skill button. This technically means that a kick has been added. And in many other characters, this is sufficient. If you started one move where you have to then hit another kick or punch afterwards, and then hit your skill button, it will count and it will continue normally. In fact, there are even some target combos that you can use this for in a very complicated way. But since the V skill is easily cancelable and not really something you specifically want him doing all the time, it would mean that every time he fails to do the move at lift in the wrong timing, it might come out, which means that in turn the actual recording is not lenient at all and might end up being super difficult, which I cannot really have. No one's going to learn anything from ZekuBot if they can't even input it. So our primary goal there will be figuring out the timing or a way to manipulate the timing so that the player can always input the correct thing without having to worry about that, and yet still have enough space for Idaten and for his V skill. What is more complicated about this entire thing is that while his V skill definitely does combo into things, it isn't specifically given or shown how this happens. The V skill that is shown is for the old version. We presume that the V skill is technically the same for the new version, for the younger version, sorry. But I didn't see anything from the showcase that made that abundantly clear. When it hits, you are also able to change the properties with directional buttons to change where the person ends up on the screen. So if I end up in old mode, when close to the other corner, or when the other person traps you into the corner, if he can manage to hit with the V skill, he can manage to get himself out. But do I want him to get himself out of the corner? Do I care? And thinking about that has the potential to mess up the young version's flow, depending on what exactly it does.
Round 1.
Hopefully,
Fight.
it either works similarly or can be easily tricked into being something else at some point in the flow. My utmost hope is that however his young form reacts to me hitting the V skill button will at least on whiff allow him to jump back. Namely that the older form's V skill, if nothing else, is long enough that if it fails, he would then go into another move naturally, and if it is short in the younger form or doesn't do anything because I've set up some other trickery that only the young form can do, the situation changes and the young form is then able to instantly jump back against the wall and get to the other side, because that's the key to the bot itself. If he happens to turn himself into younger form while in the corner, then he should aim to get out of the corner. Therefore, I will also give the older version the version of Fukuro that makes sure that he gets out of the corner, so that he can then start his backdash zone out style game. While it would be cool, and I know I can definitely see how the character overall would use both sides of that move, making sure that he ends up in front of you when he is pressuring you, if he ended up there and for some reason changed form back into old, and making sure that he uses the other version to get out of the corner when he has the chance, the bot is probably only going to have the second option. He will always be aiming to use this move to get out of the corner, and never for pressure particularly. The other thing to note is that his V reversal was only shown off in a small spacing, and I actually expect that it is not going to be too unpopular. What I should say is that this character has a very specific flow when it comes to using his V trigger that might make his V reversal worth seeing, and therefore might indicate that I have a reason to give him a full V throughout all times. His V trigger is not so overwhelming that you need to worry about it, and honestly he doesn't even reactivate it until he hits the button again, so he could just be in that mode a lot of the time, and it would make no real difference to gameplay. However, he does have a good reason to V reversal fairly often, or at least to V reversal at a specific point. I can easily tell from the play styles there are that if he gets pressured to the point where he can't function, it is better to use his V reversal to get out and then just wait until later, because the primary use of his V trigger, aside from obviously the cancel to get a little bit of extra damage, is to set up a situation where you can combo into super and do a huge amount of damage. He's exactly the sort of character which, as I was noting before, I expect that the sort of people who are upset about Balrog are going to be upset about Zeku, just not at first. because he has very similar flow and he has very similar I'm almost dead, but now I'm going to explode and you will die. He just can't do it from the same spaces as Ibuki, and I'm not absolutely even sure of that. He might be able to do so, and it just hasn't been made clear yet. So, we're definitely going to see some playstyles in which people save up a lot of their meter, because he's specifically built as a character who doesn't need his EX for much except defense in old form. If you knock him down, he may need to use his meter, but he's also supposedly a character with the same sort of wake up button, well, wake up invincible move setups as others. Namely that he has different forms of invincibility on different buttons, so while he still does have to use meter to be absolutely sure of it, you don't necessarily have to do it as much against characters who get most of their damage one particular way. For example, Zeku versus Cammy, he has no reason to wake up with EX unless he's low on life. At the beginning of the round, just wake up with light and make sure that you don't do it too often. If you expect Cammy is going to hit buttons, block, and if you feel she's done that enough times, do it the other way. There is not a lot of worrying about anything there. So, moving from there, let's get into a little bit more technical stuff in terms of what he is able to do and what his flow in terms of throws and aims are more likely to be like. We already know the first aim of the bot will be to use Gram from long range, kick the opponent when they're trying to approach him somehow. Leave a lot of active frames out there so that the player must at minimum learn how to get from their side of the screen to Zeku before he can do something else to be ready for them in some way. And because it is like a fireball that crosses the entire screen at once, he has a very similar ability to Nikali. In that you cannot specifically decide, I'm going to do this way, because he can just hit you from pretty much anywhere on the screen, and if you refuse to block, or are at that moment decided to make your approach mix up, he might catch you, and that would be that. So the situation you're looking for in that space is going to be obvious based on which Gram he uses, and if I can't give him multiple ones, then sure, you will have some ways of making sure that you can get in on him more easily. But since it's already fairly clear that I'm going to need to add multiple buttons like this for Hayagake anyway, I might just give him all three and see what happens. Because he should be able to keep you far enough out that you randomly getting lucky or safe based on the fact that you use an unsafe approach, an approach that would be unsafe against heavy or medium, and you happen to do light. This is not really different from how trying to deal with Nash is. Especially if I make the system for the bot, since he's probably going to be advanced at least. If I make the system for the bot more complex, so that you can't just go, okay, well, he did Gram, I got through, so I get a point. Because they're fairly easy to tell apart. There's a little bit of confusion at the beginning between heavy and medium, but once you've got it, you mostly got it. And therefore I could simply make it so that the player must understand which Gram happened, especially if they have different frame data. Far more so if they have different frame data on whiff due to different levels of block stun. That will become super important for anyone playing against him at that time. But this doesn't affect the actual inputs too much. It's just a matter of considering how best to set up the flow after Gram itself. It's clear that he has to backdash at some point. He is not the sort of character who does not need to dash away from people. The question is whether or not backdash directly into Gram is a good idea. I think probably not. And that was what made me consider just going backdash straight to down and stop there and see what happens. The problem with backdash straight into down is that it doesn't necessarily lead to him doing anything in particular at all. And that pushes me more toward putting Graham at the beginning of things and doing the complex hiding at the end of the things. Functionally, this is so that when he does it, you don't have to worry about, okay, did he do this at a sensible time to do Graham itself? Kareen and other bots that can easily just do moves in combos or do moves in neutral that are things you have to learn to deal with. Those bots don't care where in neutral they are most of the time. In fact, the more technical a bot is, the more often the bot cares about where it is supposed to be in neutral. To the point where Guile has this to a degree where I don't really have an option other than to effectively use the point system to tell the player, stand here, or you won't learn what you're trying to learn. It's easy to run in on a bot or to move to a particular space on a bot that isn't going to react to what you're doing, so just don't do that to yourself. Move to the space that your opponents in ranked or casuals will be trying to keep you at, so that you learn how to deal with that space. We know you can win when the opponent's space is disadvantaged relative to yours, but can you win when it's not? But for the sake of making the bot clear and useful, it's better if the player does not have to figure out exactly what I mean when I say stand at this spot on the screen, and just make it so that the bot somehow makes them stay at that point on the screen, at least if they want to get any points off it. Fortunately for us, his V reversal, which I was mentioning before for this reason, is punches. And I'm so glad that it is punches, because it being punches means that I get to hit a forward heavy punch as a triple punch. His unique attack, his overhead, is also his V reversal button, which is an extremely useful thing here. So we're definitely going to be seeing that overhead somewhere in the bot, because I think that learning to deal with his V reversal is worth it based on the explanation that was given in the showcase. Basically, that the V reversal is not super good, but it's worth it to get out of a lot of things that characters with weaker, slower V reversals don't manage as well. He's not a Buki level ninja in terms of getting himself out of trouble with his V reversal, but he's certainly at least on the Colleen level or Ed level. And while theirs move less distance than you'd want, you actually have to understand something that I was practicing today. You should always remember that because of the way a character stands when they're getting hit, the distance that a V reversal leaves you relative to your opponent, or even if it knocks them down sometimes, is dependent on what move they were hitting you with to begin with, and how early into that move you hit V reversal. If you want to make a quick test on this, the one I was using today is simple. Give Rashid the wake up option of light spinning mixer, and then any guard recovery options you like, just for the sake of having them. I prefer forward medium punch, and actually that's the only one I really cared about at the time. But I know he has other good stuff he can use, like light kick and crouching medium kick and roll, those sorts of things. The idea being that you just knock him down, go to where you want him to try it from, and as soon as he does it, V reversal. If you have a knockdown or a knockback style V reversal, knockback being the one I'm more concerned with, because I play Chun-Li of course, your knockback style V reversal, if you hit Rashid early enough into spinning mixer, he's technically airborne and it will become a hard knockdown. If you hit him toward the end of spinning mixer, he's technically grounded again, and you will get a regular knockback, and he will be close. if you do it very early, I think depending on the spin distance that you were at when he clipped you, especially if you were expecting it, you knock him back even further than you'd expect, and some follow-up moves don't work, the distance you end up at is different, all these things change. And the same is going to be true of Zeku. So I want to give him his V reversal so that everyone gets a clear understanding of when he can actually get away from them and when not. Fortunately, he doesn't seem to have any other specific command normals. And putting forward Heavy Punch just at the beginning of anything still will probably allow it to go from the light medium first half of the target combo that I will hide or put somewhere into the correct version for the ender. The difficulty from there is going into the kick, but since forward Heavy Punch is so easily to hide lots of things in, we can probably manage to get most of them in there without too much stress. He's got Heavy Kick and down Heavy Kick. It's not a lot of things that he does, and it is the end of a target combo, so a bot usually won't need to know it. It's mostly going to come down to mix-ups, and as a general rule, when a bot has a good button for a meaty, that could lead into something good, unless it's like CamiBot, who is specifically built to try to meaty you. More or less, I don't put any effort into this. If there is good meaty on knockdown, you're going to have to worry about it a different way. They also assured us that Zeku has no throw loop, so his throwing is not going to be a heavy part of his game plan for most people, other than as a defensive tool if his buttons happen to be slow-ish or don't lead into anything off of the lighter one. Which leaves the situation open for a bunch of other things. That said, if it is possible to hide certain specific things in his throws while still keeping his main stuff going, you might see a couple. Kareen has it because Kareen has really good walk speed. And I didn't really need all of the space for Kareen stuff, but I may need it for Zeku, and therefore he's unlikely to throw you, but thankfully, according to what we've heard, he has enough good mix-ups overall, especially with said overheads, that him throwing you is probably not going to be a heavy part of the game plan, unlike Ed, for example, who I greatly regret the amount of the throwing that EdBot can do. It is actually less than I prefer. Because Ed as a character does have a couple of good straight up mix-ups, but they're frame style things. Once you learn them, there's not really much to be afraid of. So, similar to how Guilebot needed to throw but didn't, and can only do it in the 1.0 version, he can only do it in very specific situations, and in the 2.0 version he only really does it when he manages a certain type of jump. I mean, that's good given the plan, but it doesn't really help overall. I'm not absolutely sure that Zeku is going to be one that needs to have his throw a lot, but there's not a lot of good places to put it, quite frankly. Unless they are willing to give the old style of flow in which he gets to use his throw button to substitute as if it is his light kick to finish up on the Hayagake ender, then I'll be able to do something, but it might still cause some weird behaviors. However, I am definitely thinking about this because his air throw is possible out of his wall jump, and his air throw is also possible at another time that would probably be useful to put it. So, if his wall jump into a button happens to be a kick into actual throw, I'm not sure what will happen in terms of the plink, but it might turn out to be a good thing overall for everyone. Because then at least you would have to worry about it, and you can't just decide, okay, he's in the corner, he's going to jump back now. I should be able to do something about this. That is probably going to be the part of the character that is the least lenient in terms of the bot input. Most likely when he does do something, I will make you hit the throw button as the filler of the space between the end of one move in young and old mode, so that he appears to jump back with air throw and solves your problem. Of course, unfortunately, if you're familiar, jumping back with air throw or any button will prevent you from being able to do the actual wall jump. So, it's basically going to come down to, if this button misses altogether because you weren't in range and then you jump forward, then you get air thrown. If you actually block to the button, then the hit stun will extend the amount of time before the next button comes up. The throw will end up being hidden, he will jump back and have the correct timing for a differently timed wall jump. But obviously, since you didn't jump at the same time if you're remotely sane, then he won't have the problem with it. You'll be able to see all this probably in real time on Tuesday next week when he's released. Obviously we have, as I mentioned before, really good internet, and it's more than likely that we'll be among the first to actually have Zeku able to be streamed and unlocked.
Final round. Fight.
So, what I'm most likely going to do then is to try to do a lot of what I have in mind. Between then, this weekend I'll obviously watch some more stuff and write down a ton of ideas for said bot. And then as soon as he's available, I'll obviously try to install and get it working as quickly as I can, and it'll be on stream most likely. If it turns out that those ideas don't work at all as expected, or his buttons don't work out in the way I hoped they would due to interactions with other people's hitboxes or something, because the frame data is obvious, but frame data is only the first step in understanding how to get bots working properly, because the numbers are slightly misleading in particular ways. It's good for telling you what to punish, but not for how to put things together and hide things, because the hit and block stun of moves is not actually specifically tied to a lot of things. Normals, it tends to be pretty even, but specials can be a little weird. So, seeing a special that is -2 does not tell you anything about the amount of time that special takes to actually hit you once it has hit. If you block certain specials, you are in block stun for 20 frames. If you block other specials, you are in block stun for much shorter than that. Similar with knockdowns, understanding the amount of time it actually takes for the move to complete doesn't tell you anything about the knockdown. The knockdown data that you're given tells you how long after your opponent recovers you recover and stand up, but it says nothing about how long the move took from the time it connected with you until the time you stand up. This is important to charge players mostly because they need to know, if I immediately started to hit this button at the beginning of the opponent doing this move, by the time they get to me, am I now ready to do my charge move? But that is not related at all to knockdown timing. So there are definitely moves where you think that will work and it doesn't. This is also going to be an issue for Zeku, but it's not one I actually put into a lot of spots as a concern. But for Zeku it will matter because it determines how long his flows stick into each other, and that's the thing that I will have to spend the most time testing and checking. How long do Zeku's moves take from the time they make contact until the time Zeku can move again, which is not the same as basically anything, and not always given anywhere in any way that most people could easily read or understand. You can in fact get certain pieces of this data by understanding what certain values in-frame data 5 and the FAT app will give you. But we strongly suggest that if you have any questions about how to use it for this sort of thing, that you direct these to frame data 5 specifically. All bot posts are accompanied with frame data 5's Twitter handle, so you will be able to find and quickly contact them if you have any pressing questions. At last we spoke with that person. They were willing to support both your understanding of bots and the game itself, so feel free to at least send the question to them, even if you don't expect them to answer you immediately or personally. They're most likely going to be thinking about it and may talk to us if something is off and we didn't understand something. I'm sure that if they are able to, they'll clearly correct anything we've done weirdly that way. So yes, moving back from there, it's very difficult to eyeball the full timings for a move by watching something like a showcase, so most likely that's what I'm going to be looking at when we are testing out. And I'm also obviously going to be attempting to play as much like the bot as possible within the matches that we have in any lounge that happens on that day or the day after, in order to give everyone their own chance to show me how this is going to interact with their playstyle and what I can or cannot do to make it better. Often, unfortunately, it turns out to be more so cannot, because that's just the nature of certain characters. You only have so much you can do. That was so good. As Sejam says, sometimes your spacing is just world class. Oh well.
You lose.
Someone call the police because that was robbery.
Round one.
So, the important thing from there finally is the knowledge that certain of Zeku's moves in EX form gain a lot more functionality. There are some of them that are just straight up mix-ups in the spatial sense. I'm pretty sure the bot needs some of these, but not a lot of them. The spatial style mix-up is one where the only reason it works is because you have already put your opponent into a position with some other move that they probably weren't defending properly to confuse them about something. Generally, our bots don't contain these because the bot's aim is to teach you how to learn to deal with moves so you never end up in the spatial mix-up. Learning how to deal with the spatial mix-up is generally a sign that you've already gone wrong in the match. It may save you, but it's not a long-term solution for learning to play against the character. Learning to stop Cammy's mix-ups. Learning to stop Cammy from... learn to, for example, deal with Cammy when she does turn Knuckle into whatever is not really a matter of your understanding of turn Knuckle. It's a matter of your understanding of Cammy and why she got to do turn Knuckle without you doing anything about it to begin with. Because at high levels, the reason why everyone talks about how turn Knuckle is bad has nothing to do with the move's properties. Turn Knuckle as a move, the properties of turn Knuckle are wonderful in nearly every way. It goes through fireballs, it technically spends some time I think they took away the functional airborne part actually. But it acts as if...
No, I think it actually is still. You can, if you try to grab Cammy out of turn Knuckle, it doesn't work.
Alright then. So, right, when I say functionally airborne, I mean unthrowable more so than if you do lows it won't work, or if you hit her it won't always... There's the occasional thing that they actually fudge the numbers for, but don't worry, these are... Except, no, actually, even in Marvel, if they're fudging the numbers on something like that, the property of the move, it's probably because some character can't punish it if you don't. And it causing inconsistent behavior has a lot more to do with people expecting things that don't make sense when you understand the properties of the move and trying to base everything on what you see on the screen. Which, it would be nice if all fighting games work like that, and we can probably talk to Mike Z about that, but at the moment we're still working on the, okay, this move looks really cool, but we can't really let you not be able to throw it. So, if you assume that move is functionally airborne, and goes through fireballs, and is plus, and covers half the screen, you would think, well, this move is godlike. And at the lower levels, it is godlike. The reason why that move is so good at lower levels, it has nothing to do with the fact that lower level players suck at defending from turn knuckle. And the reason high level people tell you turn knuckle isn't that good has nothing to do with the properties of the move. It's primarily that no one will ever give you the spacing to do turn knuckle. You will see it once in every tournament, maybe, at high level play. Not because if you could get away with it, it would be a bad idea. It's that no one will ever let you get away with it. They will punish you long before you ever get to the point of, oh, here's turn knuckle, I should block this. That does not happen. And as a result, there are a lot of moves that have that same sort of spatial mix-up to them, where once they have happened, and you have not defended properly, things get messy. But you had to get yourself into a situation where someone thought, I can turn knuckle now because I have set you up, I have knocked you down with this other thing, you are scared of this other move I can do. Something else has made you think, okay, turn knuckle time. And it's similar for at least 4 of Zeku's moves, which is a lot, but I'm not sure they're... Based on the demonstration, I'm pretty sure that 3 of them are actually just the same move with different buttons. So Zeku has 3 moves, some form of gram, or... no. Once again, that cannot be gram, I just keep on saying that because it was... Right, Bushinsho. So I'm pretty sure that all 3 versions of Bushinsho are very situational, spatial, mix-up style things. I'll still have him do them, but I'm not going to set up the bot or the goals of the bot around dealing with this mix-up because they are, for the most part, so slow that it's like telling you to deal with Kami's turn knuckle. And while the Kami bot does have turn knuckle, you'll note that not much of the bot is based around dealing with it. This is usually how I make the decision for what should be the first point system for the bot. The thing you're supposed to learn quickly and get over, and then start focusing on all the other things that are the real problem, to prevent getting into the situation where that is ever a thing. So, if anything, he's likely to have more stuff based around EX Bushinsho and Bushinsho mix-ups off of the edge shift, and Gram might be an entire thing into the game itself. We're more likely to see it that set up style, at least at the beginning when I'm figuring out what the bot can do to open people up. Because aside from like 2, all bots actually are supposed to have some way to open you up just to put the stress on. Sure, if you mess up, you'll eventually die, but if I don't give the bot something to make you go, okay, if I do this wrong, I will slowly lose all my health. The only bot that doesn't have this is effectively Colleen, and Colleen doesn't really need it because Colleen does so much super that it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter how much you punish her super because that's not part of the point system. So yes, Colleen is probably the only bot, aside from the very first 2, where they have specifically been given a way to open you up. And now that I think about it, first 2 doesn't really count because if you're not good at attacking throws, Kenbot can open you up too. Nikali does not do it. You can literally block against Nikali bot for the entirety of the match and you will eventually die from chip and nothing else. Fong was also not initially given any way to open people up, but we realized that was bad and then gave him some stuff where at least if you decide to block the entirety of his pressure, then he will still do something which either causes you to get poisoned and then have to deal with more pressure, Or he can still throw you, but I think he has a variant where that's no longer a case, so... Fang was the other one that I was counting, even though I'm recognized I probably shouldn't count him either. Therefore, Zeku needs to have at least some way to open you up, and I prefer if it's not throw because I don't think that's going to be a heavy part of the main game plan of players. However, if I realize, oh, this is good because his throw range is good or something, they imply that his throw range is actually fairly bad, and therefore I'm not really assuming this. But if it turns out that throw is the main way that people decide to open you up with Zeku, then sure, let's go with that. But otherwise, I'm going to need to figure out how to get the left-right mix-up, because the indication was you do not have to stand block it. He has moves that come down from the air, straight left-right mix-up. You don't know which side he's going to appear from. It's very similar to Bison's double reverse, but again, stand block is not required. So I need to create a situation where you're dealing with his crouch medium kick versus some other craziness. And that is going to probably lead to us having a fair amount of either first frame inputs or ones that I do, the kind I don't like, because if they are not done perfectly, then maybe my bot and your bot are not the same by rhythm and things look completely different. So I'm probably going to end up putting them in as first frame even if they don't need to be.
Final round. Fight.
So of course, this sort of stream is for anyone who has a strong interest themselves in either building one, suggesting stuff to us about one. If you really want, send your ideas or information about ZekuBot before the end of the week, and I'll see what I can get in, what else I can add. If you have time to show up to any of the streams during the week, most likely I'll be the one responsible for most of those, and you'll get to see him either in play directly, or someone else will be streaming just to see if they can find Zeku to play again. Last time we tried this, it didn't work out too well, honestly, but Zeku is more likely to get a very high percentage of players than Ed. And there's a lot of reasons for that that don't really have to do with him as a character. Primarily the reason why Zeku is more likely to see play than Ed is because no one knew who the other characters were. Even if they were just sitting on fight money, they weren't necessarily going to go, this character looks interesting enough for me to spend my fight money on. They would have waited to see what anyone else thought. Now we're at the end of the year, there are at least a few people with some fight money sitting around, or people who have decided within the time frame that they liked enough of the other characters, let's say Manat and Colleen, or Manat and, well, more likely Ed and Abigail, some combination of the other characters, and decided, this is worth saving my time and getting the season pass. And they then did that. So you're going to see more Zeku as a generality. People who bought the season pass within the year that didn't have it before and therefore didn't start off with the characters at that time. People who have leftover fight money. People who think he is the sickest thing ever. People who aren't really sure, but again, because they actually have fight money. And of course, the simple fact that anyone who really wasn't paying that much attention before now just has fight money because they weren't paying attention, and now out of the characters they're likely to try to choose the sort of person who decided, I don't like Colleen or Manat or Abigail, I didn't even bother with Akuma, or probably bought Akuma really early. Those people now have a bunch of fight money and nothing in particular to do with it. So it's most likely that their response is going to be, well, this guy looks interesting and fresh and lots of options, so let's play him. So expect a lot more Zeku than other characters. I'm hoping I'm right because it makes the bot easier. I'm hoping I'm wrong because I'd like the variety to stay about where it is.
Round 2.
But it's also more likely that a lot of people are going to think they want to play Zeku at the beginning and not really do that. But the other reasons I mentioned will leave it such that there are a lot more people who have the option of doing that than the other way around.
I don't know, there were a ton of Colleen too for the whole freshness thing.
That was because Colleen took relatively long.
Yeah, there was a pretty long space.
And they didn't really release any, like, Fight Money style costumes or stages in that block either. In fact, everyone was just upset because we got Temple of Ascension, Anakuma, and then this big dry spell. So, not expecting a lot of people who bought Colleen
Round 1.
to buy Zeku.
Fight.
But I'm expecting the same phenomenon as you saw with Colleen, except I'm trying to basically say that it will be way worse, because if you found Colleen interesting but had nearly enough fight money, you didn't necessarily buy her, you waited until you got to see that whole glut of Colleens and decide, you know what, based on how this character works, based on how other people are playing her or not playing her, based on the fact that no high level player has instantly taken her up and gone straight to the top, I'll pass. But we all know who's going to play Zeku, right? And as soon as he picks up Zeku, it's not even like a disincentive then.
Wait,
The question
who?
of Shan, of course.
Shannon. Well, Alex has been playing every single except for now.
And
I don't
not to
understand
mention,
why he picked him, but I suppose he
because
does need a
he's
pocket
a
character at
multi.
this point.
What are you talking about? He's a multi-styled ninja old man. Day one main. I'm serious. There could be a betting pool as to whether or not Shen would actually play Zeku, and whoever bets against it would be standing to make a lot of money. But more importantly, we expect that Zeku will get a response from Shen. We expect that he will get a good, strong look from Infiltration. And the constant joke / reference online is that as soon as Maximilian sees this character, he's going to be all over that. And all of the Max fanboys, shout out to the Max fanboys, all of the Max fanboys will be playing Zeku day one. And that will just be an incredible glut of players.
I really hope Infiltration finds a character, though. He's kind of homeless at the moment.
No,
and it's kind
I
of
want them to buff Jury properly so Infiltration can play Jury.
Me too. As a jury, I am completely biased in saying this.
But he's honestly not too far off. Based on the last set of playing that I saw him do, I would honestly believe he's the only person so far who has convinced me that if they buff Jury in exactly the way that everyone requests, in Infiltration's hands, she would be godlike. You only need to give Infiltration 2 things to make Jury godlike. The rest of us, we might have to struggle, but Infiltration can manage. So let's continue to hope for Jury buffs in the exact sensible Jury buffs that everyone requests. I'd say that it would be good for you too, but those buffs in question would not help you at all. So you'd continue to play her mostly as
I just
pocket
don't
stuff.
want to be thrown out of Rio Dantatsu. I'm sorry.
That is not the buff you would
If
get.
there's one thing they can give me, it's that. Because that is just complete, utter nonsense.
You're not getting that. Unfortunately, you are going to have to live with the... Well, we don't know that. For all we know, after being yelled at over and over and over about the same two problems that Juri has, Capcom might decide, let's make Ryoda and Tatsu throw invincible. And then you'd be happy and everyone else would continue to curse them. That could be a thing.
I would be so very... Because I mean, like, I don't even think I need her medium Fuharen to be to be an overhead. Honestly.
Yes, this is why we don't let you balance your...
In order for me to be happy, I mean.
That's what I meant. You're exactly the sort of person that the community does not need in certain situations. The person that looks at the most nonsensical buff ever and goes, thanks Capcom, this is exactly what I wanted, and leaves everyone else going, what?
It's true.
And Capcom goes, thanks for your feedback, we did great.
Well,
leaving everyone else to cry.
It's not that I don't think it's, like, that needed. I'm just... I wouldn't complain about it, which is probably the problem.
Still, yes, everyone be ready for as many Zekus as you can handle, which in this case might be twice as many as any other character. Pun intended. And therefore, as a result of that, I will actually be trying to get the bot out as quickly as possible. Since he is the last bot of the season, I don't actually see a reason to release that bot specifically on the usual timeline because there is no secondary work to be done, and I've had a whole week to prepare all of the things I need to do him with. The main problem would then be that the disguisement stream would still have to happen for the most part. I'm still of the opinion that you do somewhat need them to understand what's going on.
Lara wins.
But overall, it might be that disc guidance will get moved up that week. It might be that it all ends up flowing so perfectly that the stream I do in which I input the things turns out to be the equivalent of disc guidance. Which would be the equivalent of the Colleen bot creation stream that we had back at the very beginning.
Fight.
We can never be totally sure what will happen, because I can do those fairly fast and the testing process is relatively limited at this time, so whenever the bot is done, you're most likely going to get it right away. And that will be the last bot of the year, unless we need a ZekuBot 2, based on either a renewed understanding of how the character is played at decent to high level, or just because it's impossible to fit everything into one bot. However, since Capcom does not allow us to customize these things or cross-load, you can bet I'm going to make my maximum effort to make it so you do not have to have two bots. That said, if I can figure out which characters Zeku is more likely to stay in certain forms against, based on the invincibility and or properties of certain moves, it might happen.
I'm sort of looking forward to him. He seems at least interesting enough to fight against.
You say that now.
Okay, in theory, he looks interesting to fight against. Is that better?
Well, again, not everyone has the same complaints about this game. I've never once heard you complain about Balrog, so I presume that you're okay with that sort of character. As am I.
Honestly, don't fight that much Balrog, so...
But I mean, you fight Lara and you have the same, oh look, my life is gone reaction that can happen with Balrog. And it's never made you complain before. Granted, you play Bison and Mika, who tend to have a different approach to Lara, even if they tend to lose life at the same rate. So, who knows?
I don't
Also,
know.
you're
I
not
caught
sliding
myself.
enough.
I thought I told myself that I would not be the kind of person who is like, yeah, Laura is brain dead. God damn it, I fucking hate her. But I play Omni Rapid enough to at least have a little salt, even if it's not
Well,
even if I don't mean
we will all be
everything I
reminded
say.
that being quote-unquote brain dead does not make a character something you should disrespect.
Nope.
You should be complaining
That's
that your
true.
character does not have enough ways to deal with stuff. That is how we get better games. We do not get better games by complaining that this character is too easy to play. No, make my hard to play character able to stop them. Or at least make it so I understand what stopping them is about. On the other hand, I mean, we did see today someone who did wake up, back, jump, Roman cancel,
Ah, damn it.
air throw. So, I guess at the end of the day, there's always the hard position.
Wake up, backdash, YRC, instant back jump, air throw.
Right, so at some point you have to accept that sometimes you just need to get good. Sometimes you need to get inhumanly good, but
Well.
However,
Remind me what I'm supposed to use the stand heavy kick for against Laura.
the stand heavy kick is to be treated as if you are blocking, to make Laura slow, unable to move forward at you by dashing, so that you can then use Psycho Burst and Slide because she has to move forward by walking.
Okay. So I almost had it, but I was a little off. But no, Balrog to me is just like an annoying Zangief, so I don't have that much, like, salt against him. I have way more salt against Urian than I do against Balrog.
Well, we all have our own stresses.
Hmm?
We all have our own stresses. Here he is taking advantage of those extremely long Alex Yomas. Alex is a good example of a character who only needs like one thing. It's just that no one can agree on what that one thing is. Because there are like 4 different things that would make Alex really good if they were taken seriously and not half-assed. But half-assing any of them wouldn't help. Half-assing all of them wouldn't help. But giving him all of them would make him terrifying, so who exactly do you make happy? I can honestly say that if I were in charge of developing or balancing this sort of thing at Capcom, I would just wait until someone got really high level with Alex and showed extreme dedication, then I'd fix him however they wanted it done. Because if I can't please everyone, I might as well please the one person who, like, takes it totally seriously. Because I assure you that if they gave Alex all 4 things he needs, none of us would beat him. He is almost a stupidly strong character, but he can't get going. And therefore, if they gave him enough of those ways to either get going or not need to, we would be crying all the time.
Does anybody still play him? Like,
Gunfight and Cool Kid, I think, and like one Japanese person.
Oh, Kid.
Gunfight still
What's
plays
his
him?
name? Donpachi, I think is the name.
Yeah, that's it.
Donpachi? Yeah.
Although I'm not sure if...
stopped for good reason.
I don't think
Abigail
Donpachi
is the
counts,
best.
but...
I'm pretty sure that one... so was it Storm Kubo that switched to Abigail?
Yeah, but that's just...
Oh, okay.
it's Hugo. It's just like Hugo is better. So.
So we have a total of 3 high-level Alex players who are still pushing the grind. Of course, the other way to do it is to like ask Kenny Omega. But you know, I'm not being totally serious there.
Alex wins. Round 1. Fight!
There we go. Of course, if they do actually change anything about Alex in the way that I'm talking about, then I'll have to redo the bot entirely. So AE is going to be interesting at the very least. Or super uninteresting, and the only thing that it will have is gold and an incredibly flashy, cool looking KO animation.
Yeah, I don't know. I do hope they have that palette swap thing though, because the gold's a little much. Gold never ages well.
Laura wins.
The odd part is that Street Fighter has always had the whole red-orange vibe to it, and I didn't expect them to go in this direction. I mean, it's never not been that red-orange vibe. Even in Alpha 2, where it mostly... Well, Alpha 3 didn't, because Alpha 3 had, like, all the different colors with the isms and other stuff. But, honestly, Alpha 3 didn't look that Street Fighter brand-ish in the first place. And when I say that, I mean, if you look at it, you could come to the impression that it wasn't the same game. If you, like, changed the characters at the character select screen, it wouldn't look even remotely out of place. Whereas in, like, Street Fighter 3, if you took Street Fighter 3's select screen and most of the things about it and just randomly threw in other characters from some other game, it would still immediately make most people who have had any contact with Street Fighter go, wait, this doesn't look right. Didn't I see this somewhere? But this game, the weird thing is that I think that this game went in a totally different direction, but I for one liked it, so I'm gonna miss the world.
Like it's it feels more like it's a dedicated to online, and that's the vibe I've always gotten from it, which is basically what Street Fighter V is. It's basically completely dedicated to people who want to play online.
Yeah,
I mean, there's the Pro Tour and all that, but honestly, they made training mode as good as they did because they're catering to that kind of person.
Well, let's all be thankful for that. So yeah, I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna hope, especially the select screen. I love the well, I can't say that. I love the character select screen when the portraits are bigger. I don't know why they've thought to make them smaller, but I did note at the time that probably they were making a new UI, otherwise they wouldn't do it this way, so here we are. But your job is not to please everyone at the same time, so here we are on that note as well.
Yeah, I'm sure most people will appreciate the Gone Gold thing.
I just think they went full wrestling. That's what it looks like. It is 100%. This is the WWE Street Fighter.
Oh no! It all makes sense now. Okay.
They can't do that and then not have Honda as the first character of Season 3.
What do you know if Honda isn't the first character of Season 3? Maybe it is.
When's the god?
There would be so much salt.
When's Blanca?
You mean smelling salt?
We're not having Blanca in this game, okay? There are a lot of people who are very excited to see him, and a lot of people who wish all of those people to go.
Yes. I like Choco, Blanca, and all, but no. Just no.
I think he's the sort of character that you could honestly overhaul, but then all the people who... It's an easy business decision to make. We could should we overhaul Blanca? We could make Blanca really cool, yes, but all those people who actually played Blanca didn't play him because he was cool. So then who's going to play him? Everyone who would play overhaul Blanca is already playing Laura or Nikali. And there's therefore not much reason. But they might surprise me. They don't always make decisions that most of the community remotely agrees with, so such as this.
I just hope they do their season pass reveal correctly this time. I was so salty that they didn't time it so that it would be at Capcom Pro Tour season finale.
Well, part of the game is to see the business decisions made behind the game, at least for us elder folk who have interest in the FGC itself, spreading and not doing stupid things.
Well, you know me, I find the business side of it slightly more interesting sometimes than the actual game, but...
That's because you can't dictator.
Well, yeah, where else am I gonna get my bison bucks?
So, the final form for anyone who is thinking about it and doesn't, for whatever reason, you don't think you're going to be able to catch the stream or have easy access to, I don't know, not necessarily the internet, but that could even be a thing. There are some of us who are unlucky and don't get to go online and randomly read things. You never know what a person's situation in life is, and you should try to respect them as much as you can. So anyone who happens to have access to just this video and nothing else regarding our ZekuBot, it does not yet exist. It is not perfected in any way, but you can definitely know that those are the main things we intend to put into it. He should have forward triple punch so that he can do both his B reversal and his overhead at the start of some action. He should also have down heavy punch, possibly down triple punch, maybe, but I can't see a good reason for this at the moment.
Laura wins.
First frame down heavy punch at the beginning of some other action. Possibly a backdash in or at the beginning of a third. And definitely, above all else,
Round 1.
2 of his kicks to do ram. I believe the light kick one is the one that is not desperately needed. So you need a light kick, something, preferably just standing. If you want to do that, but that's not essential. The essential ones are standing medium kick, probably standing heavy kick, possibly forward heavy kick if you're going to manage the first frame. Down heavy punch, forward triple punch. And from there, again, experiment away, maybe other punch buttons, because other buttons he has for his mix-ups would roll from there. he has at least one action where he does backdash, tap down and end instantly so that he can transform after backdashes, or after something that hides the backdash so he can just transform anyway. There's a lot of good stuff there that you can get done. Probably off of throw actually, because that would be a good time for most people to actually do a transformation since it doesn't really do a lot of other stuff. Some crouching V skill maybe, but that could be in the middle of something and not have to be too specifically difficult otherwise. And at least one quarter circle forward motion, possibly a Dragon Punch style motion at the end of something else. Dragon Punch things tend to be able to go in the middle because they are rhythmically linked to wake ups, and most of the time they either go at the end of a combo or a wake up. As for enders, we need that same quarter circle forward probably. We need that to come after a back jump into the air, which is after some other complicated thing. You're aiming to get a wall jump somehow, and preferably get the wall jump so you're only in a particular mode to do it. You need an ender for light into medium to start off his target combo. You need an ender that does V skill or V trigger, or maybe both, into light punch, into medium kick, or into light kick then medium kick, depending. If that works out right, you should get some cool Hayagaki stuff going on.
Laura wins.
And you need to be able to understand how to make him to go to one side or the other with, I believe, Bushinsho. And at least one thing where he does for the circle forward and throw, or like kick then throw. I think the plink will work. So those are the pieces. If you can figure out how to combine them in a way that leads to exactly what you want, then good stuff. As for our side, the lounge itself is probably not going to be closing. But we are most likely ending the stream after this match. And the team will either disperse and get ready for something else, or push on through with the training that we had in mind for the night.
Round one.
We are looking forward to Zeku release, and you can be sure that we are going to try to make sure all of next week's streams, besides the Monday, which we may or may not end up doing based on the state of balance patch, will be focused around either the characters directly, learning to understand him, or someone going into casuals or ranked with the intention of seeing a lot of it. And if they don't, well, they'll probably just open a lounge and see if they can find anyone there. Or I'll join in with my own Zeku and see what we get.
Round two. Fight.
That opening is universal for people who backdash into something. It's the same with Jury. If you know somebody who is absolutely going to do dash back charge, works, because they're generally so caught up in that sequence that it just hits before they realize it. And as the Laura or Ryu, as the Jury or Ryu player, you know, being ready for that dash is kind of important.
Round one. Fight.
My only commentary on this match is that it always amazes me that people will think that Lara's a brain-dead character, as they say. Which would imply that you could force her to do specific things fairly easily. Like, most characters that people call brain-dead are relatively easy to control, as in getting the player using them to do what you want isn't usually hard. And honestly, that's not less true for Lara than most other quote-unquote brain-dead characters. It's usually a matter of how much the person is afraid of messing up the thing that is required to stop them. Because it's not safe or not a quote-unquote good plan or all those things. Which is why I often tell people, you beat Lara with sweep. It's not really that Lara is particularly susceptible to sweep. It's that if you sweep, Lara only approaches one way, and then you can learn to deal with that way. And if she ever decides, oh, I'm not doing that, then you just sweep again. So while a good Lara player will find a way in, you can't complain that you can't beat bad Lara players as a result of this, because bad Lara players would be easy to control. You could always say yes, well, she only has to do this many things and I have to do all of these things. And that is always completely true.
You lose.
This is especially true on people that have really good sweeps. So Cammy and Rillian especially has a disgustingly long sweep, and he just ruins your life, man. Because you can throw a clap from a very long range and he just goes completely under the whole thing. And it doesn't require that much reaction time, really. And there goes your approach, really.
Well, on that note, we're bringing the stream to an end. Good night, everyone.